in the way of stories that these many years of stories told are like links in a never-ending chain. But this particular link that we're in at the moment, unlike the other links which perhaps have been a theme that we've been exploring, or a pot where we put the ingredients of the stories in and we cook it up in our cauldron, you might say that this link is a weaving, because the stories that have been told of late are really like threads that are coming together to knit together into something that we perhaps as yet don't know what it is. Is it going to be a beanie or a scarf or a blanket or a sock or maybe a prayer rug? You know, it's like that story of the simorg bird whose feathers, when you burn them, bring down the bird to help us in times of dire need. And the story of the genie who comes out of the well and gives us a word, a magic word that we can use to cast out demons. And like the stories of the other days, where the trilling rainbow bird can come to us unbidden when we stop the quest for trying to catch it. So let's add another thread to our weaving and see what happens as it begins to form with the other stories that have been told as threads. And it's a story about that jeweler. Oh, he was famous in all the lands because of the arts work that he created. He was known far and wide, and people came from everywhere to his shop to buy that which he made. But one day, as he was working at his work table, a dark shadow seemed to fill the front of his shop. And as it entered, it filled the room, his whole shop, with a dark force that made him quake like a black cloak. And immediately the jeweler's mind went to thinking that this was the angel of death coming to get him. So he quaked in his boots and was just about to fall to his knees to beg this angel, this dark angel, from taking him. He noticed that this apparition, as it might be called, had claws for feet. Now it's known throughout the ages that it's only Iblis, Satan, the devil, that has claws for feet. So when he noticed it, in a way he was a little relieved, but he couldn't help but wonder what was Satan, what was the devil doing, appearing in his shop. But then the great Satan spoke in his deep and resonating voice. I hear that you're the best jeweler in the land, and I've come to take some jewels from you. In fact, I'll take everything that's in your window at the moment. Well, of course, the jeweler was greatly relieved, and he said, yes, take whatever it is that you want. But Iblis said, I don't want to take it now. I'm going to come back sometime. I'm not quite sure, but have it all ready for me when I come. And this dark force left the shop. Well, of course, the jeweler was greatly greatly relieved, and immediately he called his wife and he said, "Wife, I've just had the most dreadful experience. At first I thought it was the angel of death coming to get me, but it was Satan, and he wants everything in that window. So will you help me gather it all together, because it has to be put aside for him when he comes back to get it?" And his wife looked at him and said, "You old fool! Can't you see what is in our window?" And when he looked, their small daughter was sitting there in the window playing with one of the pieces of jewelry that had adorned the window shop. And of course they were horrified, because it was known that what Iblis wanted was their own beautiful child. So immediately the jeweler ordered his wife to quickly go and buy an ounce of pure silver. And when she brought back the silver, he immediately got to work to make a circle amulet. And then he etched on the amulet some sacred words. And they took the amulet to the imam to give it some blessings and credence, so to speak. And then he brought it back and put it round his daughter's neck, telling her never to take off this amulet, which indeed she wore as she grew up into maidenhood. But of course the years passed, and the jeweler and his wife almost forgot about this that had been occurring so long ago. The daughter was now a beautiful teenaged maiden, when suddenly there appeared at the door of the shop again the great satanic being, who entered and demanded what it was that he had called for when he had come before. Now the jeweler and his wife were horrified and begged and pleaded, "Please, please, take us, do not take our daughter." But of course Iblis roared and demanded to have the maiden brought to him. So she was called forth. She was called Zakia, and Zakia came, veiled, as it was the custom for maidens in those days. And when he caught sight of her, and of course noticed the amulet around her neck, not only was he somewhat deterred, but did not want to show it, but also wanted to appear somewhat gentler in the eyes of the maiden who was to become his wife. He roared in a lesser voice, "All right, you can stay with your parents for 7 days while they prepare your gowns and preparation for you to become my bride. I will be back in 7 days." So again Iblis left, and immediately the jeweler, being the being that he was, immediately got to work. He fashioned a maiden out of wax in the image of his daughter, and with the ardent creative forces that he had utilized for all his life, he created a mechanism which mobilized this wax figure. It could flutter its eyes. It could walk in a fashion. But then the 7 days passed, and Satan came back to claim his bride. And when he did, the jeweler called forth the wax figure. And of course, she shuffled out, veiled, beautifully fluttering her eyelids. Iblis, Satan, was greatly pleased. Now the jeweler, recognizing that this amulet did work, although perhaps only in a fashion, took off the amulet from the model's neck, which had been placed there, and he placed it on top of the cupboard in which his beautiful daughter Sikir was hiding. Now quickly Satan gathered up the wax maiden and carried it off to the nether worlds, where on entering those realms he immediately demanded that a great feast be prepared. Churn up the fires, we're going to have a great party, this is my bride. So he sat the figure on the seat beside him, and the demons came and chunked up the fire. The wine began to flow and celebrations were taking place. Iblis was getting very drunk. But the demons who were around him began to notice that the maiden was tilting gradually. And of course we know what was happening. She was nodding. Now all the demons noticed this, except Iblis. He was too busy imbibing and churning everybody up, as was Satan's wont, until, of course, the wax figure was completely consumed by the fire. Now all of the demonic minions around Satan were a bit frightened to tell him about this. What were they going to say? How were they going to tell him about this? But finally, one of them got enough courage to say, Sire, monarch, the maiden has gone. Ah, he said, much to their surprise, these humans, they can't stand the fire. And he never mentioned Zakir again. So looking at these other threads, and again this maybe a little bit stretched tale, as most of them are. Not quite a fairy tale though, when we bring it into ourselves and recognize that every story is part of ourselves. Isn't it so? Every fairy tale is us. So this Iblis and the maiden and the jeweler and his wife and the jewels, and they're all us, aren't they? So when we weave this thread with the other stories that have been told, it's going to be interesting what we are making. Is it an awareness? Is it a realization? Is it something that we can claim and therefore present abroad? I don't know, maybe there's another story or two.